All right, let's just jump right in. We've all been there, right? Your favorite app is down, a critical website won't load, and you're just stuck there wondering what is going on. Well, we're going to peel back the layers here and get into why our digital world can feel so fragile sometimes. And more importantly, we'll explore the brilliant engineering that, most of the time, keeps it all running.
So let me ask you this. When a huge service just goes dark, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Are you picturing a server room literally on fire? Maybe some super skilled hackers in a dark room, launching this massive attack? I mean, those are the usual suspects, but the truth? Well, the truth is way more surprising. And honestly, it's a lot more human.
It really all kicks off with this idea, this invincibility myth. It's this deep-seated belief that if we just build our systems to be bigger and stronger and add more and more backups, they'll just never fail. Simple as that.
And this is exactly how we try to do it. We build these massive digital fortresses. I'm talking redundant databases that copy themselves all over the world, whole armies of servers just waiting to jump in, and these super powerful load balancers. Think of them like air traffic controllers for the internet, just directing all the requests. I mean, on paper, it looks totally bulletproof. We really think we're invincible.
But, and this is a big but, that's right where we slam into this fascinating contradiction. A paradox, really, that just completely shatters that invincibility myth. Let's call it the deployment paradox. Just look at this number, 70%. What is that? Well, that's the percentage of outages that are caused not by servers melting down, not by cyber attacks, but by us, by the very changes we make to our own systems. Think about that for a second.
And this chart just lays it all out, crystal clear. Look at this. A whopping 70% of failures? That's from our own code, our own configuration changes. And hardware failures? That's way down here at like 15%. So what's the big takeaway here? The biggest threat to keeping a system up and running isn't some outside force, it's the very people trying to make it better.
This creates a massive problem, especially for startups. You've got two extremes. On one side, you have the old-school, traditional enterprise way. Everything is slow, super cautious, changes have to go through a dozen committees. Yeah, you get high uptime, but you can't innovate. You're dead in the water. But on the other side, a modern startup has to move at lightning speed. They're deploying changes 10, 20, even 100 times a day just to stay competitive. And every single one of those deployments, it's like rolling the dice.
So, what happens when you roll the dice and it comes up snake eyes? It's almost never a simple, clean crash. More often, it's this terrifying chain reaction, a domino effect we call a cascading failure.
Let's dig into that. How does one teeny tiny change, one little hiccup in some forgotten corner of the code, bring down the entire website? How is that even possible?
Okay, so this is exactly how that nightmare scenario plays out. Let's say your payment service, just one part of the system, gets a tiny bug and suddenly slows way down. Well, the checkout service needs to talk to it, right? So now it's stuck, just waiting. People trying to buy things get frustrated, they hit refresh, creating even more waiting requests. Pretty soon, that checkout server is totally overwhelmed with all these waiting tasks. We call them threads. It just runs out of memory, and boom, it crashes. And the load balancer, it's just trying to do its job, so it sends all that backed up traffic to the other checkout servers, which of course immediately crash for the exact same reason. And just like that, one slow service snowballed and took down the whole site.
And that brings us to this incredibly powerful and kind of humbling truth. All those backup servers, all those redundant databases we so carefully built, they are completely useless here. You cannot solve a software problem by just throwing more hardware at it. It just doesn't work.
So if building fortresses doesn't work, then what's the answer? We need a totally different mindset. We need to stop thinking about walls and start thinking about shock absorbers. We need to build our code itself to be a shock absorber.
So what on earth does that mean, right? It means we have to design our systems so they don't just hope for the best, they actively expect things to break. These are specific software patterns, and their whole job is to absorb the impact when something goes wrong in one area, to contain the damage so it doesn't spread and bring down the whole shebang.
Yeah, so with this new mindset, we can actually embrace change. We can move fast, but we can do it in a much smarter, much safer way, using specific engineering tools that are built for exactly this kind of resilience.
And engineers have this whole amazing toolbox for this stuff. For example, there's something called the circuit breaker pattern. And it works, well, just like an electrical circuit breaker in your house. If it senses that one service is failing over and over, it just trips. It temporarily stops sending requests there, which prevents that whole cascading pileup we just talked about. Or another one is a canary release. Instead of pushing new code out to everyone all at once, you release it to just a tiny, tiny group of users first. Like the canary in a coal mine. If anything goes wrong, you catch it before it affects everybody. See? These aren't just tools, they're whole strategies for building systems that can basically heal themselves.
So here's the bottom line. The ultimate goal isn't to achieve perfect 100% uptime. That's a fantasy. It's impossible. The real goal, the achievable goal, is to build a system that can fail gracefully. A system that can absorb the shocks of inevitable human error and keep on chugging, even if it's in a slightly limited way for a little while.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to chew on. This whole principle of engineering for graceful failure, it's incredibly powerful, right? So if we can design these ridiculously complex software systems to expect and absorb shocks, where else could we apply that thinking? Think about our organizations, our global supply chains, maybe even in our own personal lives. It's a pretty interesting thought.